What if I told you the loudest voice against Shadore Sanders is now clapping from the front row? What if the same analysts who called him cocky, overhyped, and not ready are suddenly preaching about his poise, leadership, and growth? You'd probably think he had the game of his life. You'd be right, but that's not the story. Because what's happening behind the scenes with the Cleveland media, the quarterback narrative, and one particular radio voice who's been at this for decades, tells a deeper, messier, and way more revealing story. This isn't just about football. It's about narratives, agendas, egos, and receipts. It's about a player who stayed silent while everyone talked. A comeback that shut down every critic, especially one man who spent months tearing him down, and suddenly had no choice but to switch sides. The twist, he's not just proving people wrong anymore. He's making NFL history, and it's starting to look like some folks in the media can't handle it. So before you jump on the Shadore Sanders bandwagon, buckle up. Because the road to this moment was way uglier than you've been told. And the people now praising him were the same ones praying for his failure. Let's get into it. They said he wasn't ready. Not because of his reads, not because of his mechanics, but because his arm was sore. Seriously, that's where the entire smear campaign started. A sore arm during training camp became the headline for why Shadore Sanders wasn't durable, wasn't prepared, and ultimately wasn't fit to play at the next level. Now let's break this down because the context matters. It's August 4th. Training camp is in full swing. Shedeur had been grinding, staying on the field after practice, putting in more reps than most quarterbacks take all week, trying to prove something. To the coaches. To the fans, maybe even to himself. And what happens? He gets pulled from practice for precautionary reasons. Arm soreness. Nothing torn, nothing dislocated. Just the kind of minor soreness that happens when somebody's outworking every name on the depth chart. The staff wanted to keep him fresh. Normal move. But the response from the media, the reaction, you'd think the guy fractured a rib. One of the loudest voices came from Cleveland sports radio, Tony Grossi, a longtime fixture in Browns media and a man who has somehow turned skepticism into a second language. He's got the fewest reps in camp, and he's got a sore arm. He obviously practiced more in this camp than he has at any point in his life. Clearly counterproductive. That's not analysis. That's an attack disguised as football talk. He wasn't analyzing what this kid could be. He was writing off the story before it even began. And when another host tried checking him, reminding him it's normal for rookies to overprepare, that soreness isn't a red flag, it's passion on display, Tony snaps back with, "Jesus God, would you give him a chance?" Yeah, that's the thing. Tony and others like him weren't giving Shedeur a chance. They weren't watching a young quarterback work himself into shape. They were looking for a reason to paint him as a disappointment before he ever took a real snap. And let's be honest here, this wasn't a conversation that happened once and moved on. This was part of a pattern. Every sports city has critics, it's part of the game, but what happened with Shedeur felt personal. Not tactical, not analytical, personal. Why? Maybe it's because he didn't fit into the narrative some of these media heads had already drafted months in advance. Maybe it's because the fan base bought into him before the media could sell him. He had charisma, confidence, the it factor, and the people listened. So the media, led by guys like Grossi, started throwing shade wherever they could. Fewest reps, sore arm, overworked, trying too hard, overcompensating. When a young QB works overtime, that's supposed to be a good thing, a non-story, the kind of extra effort that earns you clout in the locker room. But not here, not in this case. Instead of applauding the work, they flipped the narrative to make it seem like his own effort was the problem. One moment, they're questioning why he's not getting more reps with the ones. The next, they're critiquing him for working outside of team practice. It was a no-win situation by design. If he works too hard, he's not NFL ready. If he gets injured, it's his fault. If he's quiet, he's hiding. If he speaks, he's arrogant. That's not commentary. That's a playbook for character assassination. And this is where the audience needs to wake up, because this wasn't just about Shedeur. This is how narratives are built in sports media. One moment on air becomes a conversation online, that becomes a take, that becomes a headline, that becomes a thread, and before you know it, millions of people think this kid's a bust, all because some beat writer or radio guy had a gut feeling. And to make things worse, people believed it. The comments started popping up under training camp clips. His arm's already sore? Too soft for the league. If he can't survive August, how's he going to survive the Ravens' defensive line? It spread fast, and Tony Grossi, he was the loudest one holding the megaphone. Now, let's zoom out for a second. This is a rookie quarterback who hadn't played a single NFL game, wasn't even named the starter, hadn't had the chance to show what he could do with real reps on an actual game day. And already he was being treated like an overhyped disaster because of a sore arm. But here's the twist no one saw coming. That same arm, the one they said was too sore, too broken down, too fragile, it ended up throwing for over 300 yards in a game. It ended up leading a comeback that shouldn't have been possible. It ended up shutting down every critic, including the one that kicked off this mess in the first place. But we're not there yet, because before that comeback, before the headlines flipped and the tone softened, things got uglier. The critiques went deeper, the disrespect louder, and the double standards, they were just getting started. Let's talk about the man behind the mic, Tony Grossi. If you've followed Cleveland sports for more than 15 minutes, you already know the name. He's been tied to the Browns longer than some of y'all have been alive. And over the years, he's built a reputation, not as a measured analyst, not as a balanced voice, but as the kind of local media figure who decides who the villain is and sticks with it. And Shadore Sanders, from day one, he was the villain in Tony's script. This wasn't just tough love. This wasn't hold the rook accountable. This was calculated dismissal. Before Shedeur had even lined up under center, Grossi was going after him with a level of intensity that didn't make sense unless you understood the way sports media works behind the curtains. Because for Tony, this wasn't new. This was just recycling the same old playbook. If you're thinking this sounds familiar, you're right, he did the same thing with Baker Mayfield. Go back a few years and you'll see the pattern crystal clear. Pick a QB, paint them as emotional or immature, stir the pot, and then when things go bad, feed the drama and say, "I told you so." Over and over. New player, same formula. And just like with Baker, Tony never gave Shedeur a fair shake. Let's flash forward. A few games into the season, Shedeur has stepped in. He's not just managing games, he's making plays, leading comebacks, showing poise, taking hits, throwing darts. Acting, dare I say, like the kind of quarterback Cleveland has been starving for since Bernie Kosar. So what does Grossi do? He flip-flops harder than a politician in an election year. From sore arm and waste of reps to, and I quote, "Congratulations to Shedeur. Outstanding game, he won. The Browns lost." Wait, what? Did the earth just spin backward? Tony Grossi giving props to Shedeur? You had to check if he was being sarcastic. But no, he doubled down. Called it one of the most impressive days by any Browns QB in recent memory. Praised his comeback plays. Even tried to justify Shadeur's interception, saying it came from trying to spark the team. He admired the self-awareness, the maturity, and the leadership. Hold up, rewind. This is the same Tony Grossi who weeks earlier was blaming Shedeur for his sore arm, downplaying his work ethic, calling his camp performance counterproductive, and regularly questioning his place on the roster. Now suddenly, the narrative was flipped. Again, this wasn't football analysis. This was media survival. When the facts no longer fit the agenda adjusts. And Tony ain't new to the game, he's a pro at this. The moment Shedeur made it undeniably clear that he was that guy, Grossi chose self-preservation. Because staying on the wrong side of history, that only works when nobody's taking notes. But unfortunately for Tony, people are taking notes. And some of us, we got receipts. See, this is what high-visibility platforms rarely talk about. There are consequences when your voice helps shape public perception. And all season long, Grossi's voice had one consistent tone: anti-Shedeur. Questioned the sore arm. He questioned the silence during interviews. He questioned the confidence. He criticized his tape. And worst of all, he acted like talent could only exist if he approved it. But now that the locker room's bought in, the stats are undeniable, and the fans are watching, he had no choice but to jump ship. And look, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to reassess. But let's be honest, Tony didn't just reassess. He rewrote the script. He pretended none of it ever happened. No mention of the sore arm rants. No accountability for the preseason jabs. Not even a quick nod like, "Hey, I was hard on this kid early. Looks like I'm being proven wrong." Nope. Just a full-stop reversal, like he always believed in Shedeur. And you know what the most ironic part is? Tony had already buried himself deeper, much deeper, because while he was busy tearing Shedeur down, he was publicly writing for another QB. One who would soon become the ultimate example of what media bias really looks like. His golden child, Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, we're going there. But before we talk about Dylan, ask yourself this. Play button, why did Grossi, a career journalist, treat two rookie quarterbacks completely differently? Play button, why did one get every excuse in the book and the other get none? Play button, why did arm soreness become a concern for Shedeur, while 3 turnovers didn't raise red flags for Gabriel. It wasn't about performance. It wasn't about potential. It was about labels, about comfort, about which player they could control and fit into the box they wanted. Shedeur didn't play that game. He didn't kiss up. He didn't entertain the media when it attacked him. He simply dropped dimes on the field and kept receipts off it. And that, more than anything, is likely why Grossi flipped. Because no matter how many microphones you talk into, no matter how long you've been sitting behind the booth, there's no spin strong enough to cover up what Shadore Sanders is doing on that field. So what happens when the guy you've been discrediting starts outperforming your favorite? What happens when the rookie with the sore arm throws for numbers your QB1 couldn't sniff? You pivot, you praise, and you pray he doesn't remember what you said. Too late. Let's rewind the tape. Back to the dog days of training camp, before the preseason games, before the comeback wins, and way before the media started pretending they always believed in Shadore Sanders. This wasn't just the moment when the agenda started peeking through, this was when the entire narrative crystallized. And if you were paying attention, the signs were all over the place. August 4th, the day that arm soreness became a full-blown headline. Let's be real, hundreds of players deal with minor soreness every year. They get pulled for a few drills, ice it, rest up. It's not unusual, it's football. But somehow, when Shadore Sanders got pulled, it went from basic injury management to a full-on indictment of his commitment. Not performance, not attitude, just preventative treatment. But the Cleveland media spun it into something else entirely. Here's what Tony Grossi had to say. He's got the fewest reps in camp, and he's got a sore arm. Why? Well, people say he throws too much before and after practice. How counterproductive is that? That alone, that one sentence, shows you exactly what kind of spin cycle we're dealing with. Because if that was Gabriel staying late, getting extra work in, Grossi would have been gushing about work ethic, leadership, intangibles. But when Shadore does it, it's counterproductive. It's overtraining. It's somehow a red flag. Let that sink in. Extra practice is now bad. Then, when someone on set tries to inject common sense, says, look, maybe there's a method to all this. Maybe he's preparing for the speed of the game or pushing to earn more reps, Grossi doubles down. Obviously, it was counterproductive because he's got a sore arm. Oh, so now working too hard is a criticism. You work too hard, your arm gets sore, and instead of praising the grind, they use it as proof you don't belong. That's all you really needed to know. The goal wasn't to evaluate what Shadore could become, it was to find a crack, even the tiniest one, and wedge it open until it looked like the story was falling apart. And Shadore, he didn't push back. He didn't blast the media or drop a quote to go viral. He stayed quiet, got treatment, went back to work. But we saw it. Fans saw it. The ones who have watched this exact playbook unfold before. Because a week later, Grossi was at it again. After a rough preseason outing, he popped back on air saying, I'm not going to argue with anyone. All right, he had 5 series, and he went backwards on each one. Backwards? Let's talk context. In that preseason game, Shadore played with the 2s and 3s. 4 out of the 5 guys on that offensive line cut the very next day. You want to talk disadvantages? That's damn near sabotage. And even then, insiders admitted he made the right reads, but the protection didn't hold. The receivers weren't getting separation. It wasn't pretty, but it was devastating either. Yet Grossi turned it into a funeral for Shadore's potential after one night. Now contrast that response, sharp, immediate, definitive, with how he approached Gabriel after 3 straight mediocre starts. We'll get to that in more detail later, but spoiler, it wasn't nearly the same energy. And the contradictions didn't stop with the game analysis. Let's not forget the reaction to Shadore's comments about being better than other QBs. After one silent interview, where he didn't say much, kept it cool, people crucified him. Said he was being disrespectful to teammates, even though he literally said, I see what's out there, and I think I'm better than some of these quarterbacks. He didn't name names, didn't throw teammates under the bus, just confidence. Straight shooter. But what did media voices like Tony say? They acted like he declared war on the locker room. You've got to be mindful of what you say. He just can't help himself. He's been in the spotlight too long. Mindful of what, being honest? Meanwhile, another QB could openly say, I'm a competitor, not an entertainer, a clear jab at Shadore's style, and that got brushed off as swagger. No narrative, no overreactions, no think pieces, double standard anyone. Let's call it what it is. Shedeur wasn't treated like a rookie finding his footing. He was treated like a problem waiting to happen. From day one. And this conversation wasn't happening in a vacuum. It wasn't just opinion, it shaped how the fans, the front office, even national outlets viewed this young QB. Because when you hear someone with tenure, someone like Tony, repeatedly question a player's every move, every word, every choice, it influences perception. That's why this matters. And here's the truth a lot of people won't say out loud. The criticism coming from these media rooms wasn't just about performance. It wasn't even about X's and O's. It was about control. Shedeur didn't give long quotes. He didn't suck up to the press. He didn't smile on cue or play their game. He stayed focused, direct, and quietly confident. And that made certain people uncomfortable. Because when a player can generate buzz, move merchandise, fill stadiums, and get people talking without needing the media to make him, suddenly the narrative machine sees him as a threat. So when the camp soreness came, they pounced. When the preseason struggles showed, they exaggerated. When the kid said he believed in himself, they called it arrogance. But like we said in the beginning, this section is about receipts. And the receipts don't lie. Back in August. Before the wins, before the records, before the spotlight shifted, the entire narrative around Shadore Sanders was shaped by media bias. Not honesty, not analysis, just bias. The smear campaign wasn't subtle. It was calculated, and it started long before he ever had a chance to prove them wrong. But here's the good part, he did. And the guy they tried to bury, he didn't just survive, he thrived. But how they handled Gabriel's flaws. That tells you everything you need to know about the double standard in Cleveland. And we're just getting warmed up. Look, it's one thing to criticize a rookie quarterback. Quarterback is the hardest job in pro sports. Everyone knows the scrutiny is coming. But here's where things stop adding up and where the double standard becomes impossible to ignore. Shadore Sanders puts in too much work. He's reckless. Gabriel turns the ball over. Learning curve. Shedeur gets pulled with a sore arm. Too fragile. Dylan has 3 straight mediocre games. He's not losing the games. Shedeur shows confidence. Cocky. Dylan replies with, I'm a competitor, not an entertainer. That's grit. Let that sink in. Because while Tony Grossi was going full heat-seeker mode on Shedeur for everything from his interviews to his conditioning, he was also leading the Gabriel fan club. Seriously. Tony didn't just support Gabriel, he defended him with more passion than most Browns fans have shown for their entire team in the last 15 years. Let's go straight to the tape. After Dylan started the season 1-2, Grossi popped on air and said, he's not losing the games. Even the Pittsburgh game was a collaborative effort. The Minnesota game didn't lose that one either. Didn't lose the game suddenly becomes the bar. Mind you, this was the same stretch where Gabriel's QBR was well below average and his decision-making was under fire. But still, Grossi protected him like he was Patrick Mahomes running with a sprained ankle. That protection extended to everything. Bad throws, blame the receivers. Drive breakdowns, blame the drops. 3 and outs, blame the OC. Low passing numbers, blame the weather, the headphones, the turf, Mercury in retrograde. Whatever worked. This man acted like Gabriel was cursed, not careless. Here's another gem. I thought he did okay. They didn't lose. That was after a game where Cleveland looked out of rhythm the entire time, and Gabriel's stat line resembled something you usually see in the fourth quarter of a preseason finale, not week 3 of the season. But here's the wildest part. After all that protection, all that coddling, he even admitted it wasn't working. Just a few weeks later, after Gabriel's 3rd start, Grossi slid this one in. It's a little worse than I expected, I've got to admit. His accuracy hasn't been good. Wait, pause. It's a little worse than expected. We're now 3 games in, 0 signature moments, major questions about pocket awareness, and you get a quiet, sleepy, little worse out of it. Contrast that with what we heard about Shedeur. After 5 preseason drives behind a 3rd-string line, Grossi said, he went backwards on all of them. That wasn't analysis. That was a judgment. Because again, Shedeur had yet to get comfortable. He hadn't settled into NFL speed, wasn't playing with real starters. But Grossi couldn't even contextualize those struggles. He immediately buried the kid. Meanwhile, Gabriel was out there throwing screens into defenders' chests, and not only did Grossi stay patient, he stayed hopeful. You want another example? Let's talk interviews. When Shedeur did the silent interview, giving short, controlled answers, clearly trying not to stir the pot, media flipped it into a controversy. Accused him of separating himself from the locker room, of disrespecting teammates, of being too Hollywood. But when Gabriel said, I'm a competitor, not an entertainer, And people took that as a shot at Shadore's public persona. That became part of the leadership narrative. No assumptions, no backlash, just Dylan being confident. Let's call it like it is. Tony Grossi, and by extension, much of the Cleveland media, chose their favorite before either of these quarterbacks had actually played meaningful football. And that meant one got the benefit of the doubt. The other got the benefit of every doubt being weaponized against him. And look, this isn't personal. This isn't about whether Dylan Gabriel is talented or not. The kid has a decent arm, shows flashes. He might grow into something with time. But the point is, compare the treatment. One struggle, and Shedeur was under fire. 3 straight struggles, and Grossi was still airing out excuses for Gabriel like someone owed him checks from his nil bag. And it wasn't just Grossi. A chunk of Brown's Twitter drank that same Kool-Aid. Dylan was just figuring it out. Shedeur was exposed. Gabriel has time. Sanders should have figured it out by now. But here's what makes the double standard even more infuriating. Play button both QBs started 1-3. Play button both came into rough situations. Play button only one, Shedeur bounced back with a statement game. We're talking 300-plus yard performance, back-to-back comeback drives, keeping his poise when the pocket collapsed. He turned a fan base that had doubts into believers overnight. And Grossi, after weeks of mocking his sore arm, questioning his value, and warning fans he wasn't ready, he had to sit there and give him flowers on air. Awkward silence. Forced tone. You could literally hear him chewing on every compliment like he'd rather bite down on glass. That's not growth. That's cornered regret. He ran out of excuses for Dylan Gabriel, and the kid he bashed with the most energy became the one carrying the hopes of the fan base. Funny how that works. And look, we're not saying these quarterbacks are rivals. That's media hype. But it's crystal clear that how they were judged, framed, and narrated is what sets this apart. It's not about quarterbacks, it's about bias in plain sight. Because while Shedeur kept getting met with criticism at every turn, Dylan Gabriel got escorted past the media landmines with Tony Grossi rolling out the red carpet. But that red carpet eventually ends. And when it did, all the excuses dried up in real time. So the question is, why did Tony Grossi support Dylan Gabriel? The real question is, why did it take Shadore Sanders dominating on the field before he was even allowed to be treated fairly off of it? Let's step back for a second. Forget the stats. Forget the picks, the throws, the tweets. Let's talk about what's really going on here, because it's one thing to criticize. It's another thing to target. And it's clear now, what Shadore Sanders experienced in Cleveland wasn't just criticism. It felt like a smear campaign. Ask yourself, when was the last time you saw a rookie quarterback, one who hadn't even started a regular season game yet, receive this much negativity this early with this much heat? This wasn't wait and see. This was we've already decided. And the people deciding, they had platforms, microphones, influence. Some of them had entire radio shows centered around shouting their opinions louder than facts. So how does that happen? What makes one player, one talented, driven, confident rookie, get picked apart at every level while others get handed soft landings and unlimited second chances? Was it just about the reps, the arm soreness, the quiet interviews, or was it something more? Let's be honest, it looked like something deeper. Something certain people in this space don't want to admit, because once you say it out loud, there's no spinning it. It looked like discomfort with how Shedeur carries himself. He's young, he's confident, he's not desperate for approval. He doesn't need to charm the press room or beg for validation. He knows who he is, and that shakes people. Because when you're a rookie, you're supposed to play a certain role. You're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to say, I'm just here to learn. You're supposed to chase handshakes and interviews and play the game. But what happens when a player does? What happens when a player walks in and says, I belong here? What happens when a rookie knows his worth before the media tells him it's okay? For some legacy media guys like Tony Grossi, it disrupts their system. And when something disrupts your system, you do what's comfortable, you attack it. You call it arrogant. You label it as a red flag. Because let's not mince words, the attacks on Shedeur weren't based on gameplay early on. They were rooted in perception, in how he talked, looked, moved. It started with that arm soreness, but it turned into something worse. Backlash for how he responded in interviews. Backlash for how he sat during a press conference. Backlash for smiling. Backlash for not smiling. And while all of that was going on, Dylan Gabriel was out there throwing for 150 yards and 0 touchdowns and getting praised for managing the offense. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. Play button, was this ever about football? Because if it really was about football, we would have seen equal criticism based on equal performances. But we didn't. What we saw was targeted discrediting, even when nothing had gone wrong yet. The sore arm became a headline. The practice reps became ammo. The eye rolls and tone changes, every minor thing Shedeur did became suspicious. It's one thing to evaluate a player's film. It's another to weaponize perception. And let's not ignore how this fits a bigger pattern in the NFL. Young black quarterbacks, especially the ones who don't shrink under media pressure, are often labeled as polarizing simply for existing outside the approved mold. Exhibit A, Cam Newton. Exhibit B, Lamar Jackson. Exhibit C, Justin Fields. And now, Shadore Sanders. Each of them heard the same things. He's talented, but there's maturity concerns. Not sure if he's a leader. Let's see him actually beat a good defense. The goalposts move. The rules shift. The spotlight gets harsher. And if you dare show confidence on your own terms, suddenly you're the problem. But it gets even more insidious when it comes from voices within your own market. The media isn't just national, it's local. It's guys who show up to camp, stand 10 feet away from you, then blast you on air like you're some locker room cancer. Guys like Tony Grossi, who claimed he couldn't see anything positive in Shedeur early on, only to eventually walk back his entire take once the winds rolled in. Once the cars started honking when 5 took the field. Once the buzz drowned out the noise of his old sound bites. But here's the thing. You don't get to write a player off and then rewrite your own role in the story just because the narrative changed without your permission. That's not how this works. As fans, we remember what's said. We screenshot. We save clips. We run the receipts back in surround sound when needed. Because this isn't about one QB. This is about how narratives are weaponized in real time. It's about how talent is policed differently. And when someone like Shedeur speaks with confidence, works in silence, and lets the results speak, but still gets treated like the enemy, you have to ask, was the problem ever really about football? Or was it about the fact that he demanded respect before the media was ready to give it? Let's not pretend we don't know what this is. When certain players exude belief in themselves, they're called leaders. When others do it, they're called cocky, or spoiled, or not focused. And it's always the same pattern told by the same voices to protect the same system. But here's the twist. This time, that system didn't work. Because Shedeur didn't need their stamp of approval, didn't ask for their blessing, didn't bend under the weight of overhype or bad press. He walked right past all that. And when it came time to prove it on the field, he didn't talk, he just threw. He rewrote his own narrative. And all it took was one comeback to break open the whole story. They doubted him publicly. They questioned him relentlessly. And when the pressure was on, they thought he'd fold. But what happened next was something nobody, not even his harshest critics, could have seen coming. Because in one game, in one afternoon, with thousands watching and millions more waiting to say, "I told you so," Shadore Sanders flipped the entire script. Let's set the scene. The Browns are down double digits. Twice. The energy's flat. The announcers are practically writing in the L, and every person who had already made up their mind about Shedeur was just waiting for him to collapse under the weight of their expectations. And then it happened. He sparked. It wasn't just one play, it was a pulse. A shift, something intangible but undeniable, a laser over the middle, a smart scramble, a perfect sideline throw. He started stacking positive plays, reading the defense like a veteran, and moving like the game had finally slowed down. And here's the wild part. Nobody, not his critics, not his own coaching staff, not even the broadcast team expected this from the rookie with a sore arm. But suddenly, the Browns weren't just in it, they were storming back. 2 separate double-digit deficits erased. Not lucky turnovers, not pick sixes or defensive stands, methodical drives, relentless tempo, poise. IQ, arm strength. He wasn't just managing the offense, he was commanding it. And then the moment came, the one that defined everything. Fourth quarter, tight window, pressure dialed in. The defense knew what was coming, but it didn't matter. Shedeur dropped back, planted, and delivered a perfect touchdown strike. Eyes downfield, poise unshaken, timing surgical. And just like that, it wasn't about narrative anymore. It wasn't about media projections or training camp sound bites. It was about performance, clutch performance, undeniable performance. But get this, after the game, he didn't gloat. He didn't puff his chest or get flashy in the post-game presser. He stepped up, broke down his own interception, and said one of the most mature things you'll ever hear from a rookie quarterback. "We needed a spark. I was trying to make something happen. I'll learn not to do that next time." Accountability, self-awareness, clarity. The very things he supposedly didn't have were now coming across stronger than any other QB on the roster. maybe in the division. And guess who had to sit in that media room and finally admit it? Tony. Freaking Grossi. Mr. He went backwards on every series. Mr. His arm's sore, so he's obviously overtraining. Mr. I don't see anything positive. Yeah, that Tony. Here's what he had to say this time. What I found most impressive about a very impressive day, he came back from 2 double-digit deficits. He made more plays in that game than he had in his 2.5 games prior, combined. Pause. Does that sound like someone who's been rooting for this kid all along? Or does it sound like someone who just got baptized by reality? Grossi wasn't offering a take. He was offering surrender. Because Shedeur hadn't just played well, he made it impossible to keep pretending otherwise. The redemption arc was now public. The critics had no ammo left. And the same analysts who looked smug in August looked shook in October. Let me ask you something. Play button how many rookies can say they erased a double-digit lead twice in the same NFL game and walked away with over 300 passing yards? Play button how many rookies can say they did it after a month straight of being scrutinized, labeled overhyped, and buried under constant media attacks. That wasn't just talent, that was resilience under fire. And just like that, you could feel things shift. The media started hedging. The fan base started switching up. Even the locker room started buzzing. Because Shedeur didn't just silence the noise, he forced everyone to actually watch the football again. Not the interviews, not the headlines. Not the spin, the game, and if we're being real, this performance should have ended the drama. Kid showed up, showed heart, showed future franchise potential, open and shut. Right? Nope, because some folks just couldn't let it go. They still wanted him to prove more. Still wanted him to be cleaner, quieter, less confident, more humble. Translation, they wanted him to be somebody else. But the beauty of Shadeur's game and everything about this moment is that he didn't change at all. He didn't adjust who he was to meet their expectations. He forced them to respect him on his own terms. This wasn't just a comeback on the scoreboard. It was a comeback on the narrative. A full 180, a mic drop. A remember what you said about me kind of win. And all those analysts who took cheap shots back in camp when his arm was sore and he was 3rd on the depth chart. They were putting asterisks in their apologies, trying to backpedal without admitting they'd been loud and wrong for months. But here's what makes it so poetic. Shedeur didn't need to clap back. His arm did. There's a saying in sports, the tape doesn't lie. And once the tape on Gabriel started piling up, even the most loyal believers had to admit something was off. Game after game, the excitement faded. The big play promise never showed. And the excuses, they started sounding weaker every week. Because while Shedeur was taking hits, extending plays, firing darts, and lighting up highlight reels, Gabriel was stalling out. Not from a lack of protection, not because of drops, not because of rookie nerves. He was just playing small. Check the stat lines, they tell the whole story. 1 touchdown in 3 games, multiple missed wide-open reads, struggles seeing the field, especially under pressure, hesitation in the pocket. And worst of all, a complete and total lack of command. And that was the turning point. Because Shadeur's command, it was gaining gravity. He was looking like a guy who could lead the room, move the chains, and throw punches late into the 4th quarter, while Gabriel was looking like someone trying not to mess up a group project. You could see it in the body language. Shedeur walked into the huddle like he owned the room. Dylan looked like he was waiting for permission to lead. And remember that so-called media favorite? Tony Grossi, yes, still riding shotgun on the Gabriel train, had no choice but to finally notice the wheels were coming off. Let me read you what he said on air after Dylan's 3rd straight underwhelming start. It's a little worse than I expected. I have a high opinion of him, but the accuracy just hasn't been there. He's not seeing the field. It's disrupting the rhythm of the team. A little worse. We're talking about an NFL quarterback who, in his 3rd start, missed routine throws with a clean pocket, couldn't recognize zone coverages, and targeted wide receivers just 9 times in a full game. That's not a little worse. That's lost. Meanwhile, back on the other side, Shedeur wasn't just surviving anymore. He was getting better, faster, and more confident. And let's be clear, it wasn't just the stat sheet. It was the response. Play button teammates started praising his leadership. Play button receivers openly backed him during interviews. Even defensive players started saying, "That guy's got something." And while Dylan was quietly phased out of game plans, Shedeur was calling audibles, running hurry up, and getting the kind of trust you only earn, not inherit. The script had flipped. The player the media had baptized from day one, the one they said had starter potential, smart decision-making, leadership, was now being exposed as a system passer who couldn't elevate under pressure. And the one they called raw, cocky, overhyped was making NFL history. Let me say that clearly, NFL history. Shadore Sanders, in just a handful of starts, was doing things only 2 players in history had ever done as rookies, and those names were Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Not a bad list to crash, huh? And the media? Silent, not even fake claps, just quiet discomfort as facts started replacing feelings. Oh, but don't worry, Tony Grossi eventually changed his tune. Again, listen to this shift by early November. Dillon Gabriel can't operate from the pocket. He simply doesn't have the field vision. And maybe that's part of why the coaching staff gave up play calling duties to simplify things. Just like that, the glass shattered. Now Dillon is the issue. Now the coaches should have seen this coming. Now it's okay to say, he's not ready. But here's the thing, the timing of this narrative dive couldn't be more suspicious. Because right as Grossi was starting to finally admit Dillon wasn't the answer, he was also reluctantly boosting Shadore. For context, let's rewind again. Pre-draft, Tony said this about Sanders. I think Shadore gets drafted in the first round, top 20. No doubt, I don't see him falling. Back then, that was easy to say. It was all potential. But the moment the lights came on in Cleveland, that tone went ice cold. Until Shadore once again forced him to admit what he already knew, that kid could play. So the real story here isn't just 2 QBs on 2 different paths, it's about how the public perception followed the flip way too late. Because from the jump, fans were divided. Media was biased. One QB was protected. The other had to fight through the fog of narratives just to breathe. But only one of them made it through that pressure cooker and came out better on the other side. So while Dillon Gabriel fades into that quiet part of the depth chart, Shadore Sanders, play button trending across the league, play button historic rookie numbers, play button locker room leader, play button eyeing playoff chances no one thought possible. And let's be real, you can't flip that narrative anymore. It's too late. Up until now, this whole story has been told through the lens of Cleveland. Local media, local politics, hometown chatter, Tony Grossi's back-and-forth radio takes. But if you're still thinking this story ends with the Browns' depth chart, you're not paying attention. Because what Shadore Sanders is doing isn't just shocking Cleveland. It's stopping people across the country, fans, analysts, reporters, and making them recalibrate their entire understanding of what a rookie QB is supposed to look like. This man isn't just rewriting a redemption arc. He's etching his name into NFL rookie history in permanent ink. Let's talk numbers. Not just good for a rookie numbers. Not just solid for a midseason debut numbers. We're talking historic production, things we've only ever seen a handful of times in the modern era. Play button 300-plus yards, twice, in his first 4 starts. Play button multiple passing touchdowns in games where his team was double-digit underdogs. Play button advances in completion percentage and control under pressure every single week. And to be crystal clear, he's doing this without an elite receiving core, without a top-tier offensive line, without a franchise's full support from day one. He didn't walk into a perfect situation, he built it under his feet. And that's what separates hype from legacy. Because it's one thing to walk into a team with expectations and rise with the tide. It's another thing entirely to walk into a locker room full of doubt and force respect out of every single corner of the building. Coaches started trusting him. Veterans started blocking harder for him. The city started believing again. And while other rookies were getting bobbied, nursed through slow starts, or hidden behind developmental systems, Sanders was out there taking bullets and still dimming people up. You see the difference? He wasn't being scaffolded. He was being tested. And he passed not just by surviving but thriving. The ones who called it a cult, now calling it culture. The ones who said he couldn't handle a high-pressure offense, now praising his poise in clutch moments. And the media, left scrambling again, this time trying to figure out how to spin it forward. Because when Shadore hit those milestones, when he joined elite rookie ranks that only guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Justin Herbert had touched, the narrative broke. Completely. You couldn't call him raw. You couldn't say just a college kid living off his name. You couldn't say early success, but let's wait and see, because the wait was over. And here's the best part, he did it his way. Never begged the media to believe. Never turned into a character to win over optics. Never stopped grinding, even when they told him it was too much, counterproductive, or whatever lazy excuse they floated back in August. He played through it. He got better. And most importantly, he played authentic. That's rare. That's uncommon. That's legacy material. And ask yourself this. Play but how many quarterbacks, rookie or vet, can lead a team through adversity, flip a hostile fan base, carry themselves like a CEO at age 21, perform under pressure, and handle national doubters with complete silence. Play but how many can stack stats and respect at the same time, because a lot of QBs do one or the other. Some get the headlines without the locker room. Some get the yards without the wins. But what you're seeing with Shadore Sanders isn't just a good stretch. This isn't a hot streak. This is foundation work. This is a guy building a new standard, one that makes it impossible to go back to how things were. He's not chasing acceptance. He's forcing the league, the media, and the fans to adjust to his presence. And here, what stings for the people who doubted him early, Shedeur didn't need revenge. He didn't need to clap back at the critics. He didn't even need to throw shade at Tony Grossi or anyone else who tried to write him off. Because reality did it for him. Every pass, every win, every record was a receipt delivered. And now, they have no choice but to respect it. Even the people who swore he wasn't ready are sitting in front of microphones today saying things like, "I always said he had potential. You know, I was critical early on, but I'm genuinely impressed now. Hey, I call it like I see it." No, you called it how you wanted to see it. And now that it's undeniable, you're rewriting your own narrative because his just became bigger than yours. So yeah, this started in Cleveland. But it's not a Cleveland story anymore. It's a league-wide moment forming in real time, and Shadore Sanders has gone from controversial rookie to one of the most compelling names in the NFL right now. Not just because of what he did, but because of how he did it. And who he had to become to do it. So where does that leave us? Because after all the breakdowns, cut-ups, criticism, and comebacks, if you're still watching this, you're not just here for the football. You're here for the truth behind it. The story of Shadore Sanders isn't just about stats on a box score. It's about what happens when narratives collide with reality and reality punches back. It's about a young quarterback who was doubted, not because of what he failed to do, but because of what people were afraid he might succeed at doing. It's about how certain media voices, especially the loud ones, feel threatened when a player doesn't play their game. Because when a rookie QB walks into your city with a chip on his shoulder, a legacy in his name, and confidence in his step, you either bet on him early or you bet against him hard. And Tony Grossi, he bet against him. He wasn't alone, but he was loud, he was proud, and he was wrong. And when it all flipped, he backpedaled like nothing ever happened. Like there weren't hours of clips, weeks of shade, a full public campaign to tear Shadore down before the season even started. But here's the beautiful part, Shadore never cared. He didn't need to clap back. He didn't need a media redemption arc. He didn't even need to prove them wrong. He just needed to be himself, consistently, unapologetically. And when you get results doing things your way, there's always two types of people watching. The ones who supported you early, who see the vision and ride from day one. And the ones who doubted you, then tried to latch on once it was too late. You can circle every clip. You can rewind every soundbite. The truth doesn't change just because the scoreboard does. And what is the truth? That Shadore Sanders didn't just outperform expectations, he obliterated them. He didn't just silence the noise, he rewired the conversation. He didn't just prove his critics wrong, he made it impossible for them to gaslight his success. Because once a player reaches historical, once they're on short lists with Hall of Famers, once they do things first-year players aren't supposed to, the conversation changes forever. You can't edit the footage. You can't erase the stat sheets. You can't repave the tracks once the train's already moving. And what's funniest about all of this? It's that the same people who told him to be quiet are now mad they didn't see it sooner. But let's be real, they did see it. They just didn't believe it because it didn't come from them. It didn't get their stamp, didn't follow their format, didn't wait for their approval. And that's why this story resonates past football. Because everyone watching this, play button you've been doubted before. Play button you've been told to tone it down. Play button you've worked harder only to get told it's too much. You felt that silence from people who only speak up after you win. And that's why this story hits. Shadore Sanders represents every person who knew they were built for this, but had to eat criticism from people who'd never done what they were trying to do. So here's the final word, they called it hype. They spun their narratives. They tried to control the outcome with opinions, labels, hot takes, and lazy analysis. But they forgot one thing, results don't negotiate. The moment Shedeur took the field, every take had an expiration date. And now, we're watching him build something bigger than a comeback. He's building a legacy. If you made it all the way through, you're the real one. Black medium small square like this video if you learned something. Black medium small square dislike it if you still think Shadore's overhyped. Black medium small square subscribe if you want more real football stories, the kind they don't cover unless it's trending. And in the comments, just type too late, because that's what the critics are now. Too late to shift the narrative, too late to gatekeep the fandom, too late to downplay greatness once it's already in motion. Because the truth, this isn't about being right. It's about finally recognizing what was real all along. See you in the next one. Be great.